There's another one you don't want to hear. Frankly, neither do I.
1, 2, 3, set, go.
Hello and welcome to the Power Chord Hour podcast, episode 11. I'm your host, Anthony Merchant. Thank you so much for checking out this week's podcast. And I'm very excited. You know, we have had guests here the past few weeks, and I've been so stoked on this one since I reached out to him, and I was so happy he was down to do it. If you heard a few weeks ago, I did an album anniversary interview with Joe Rio of Hidden in Plain View for the 15th anniversary of Life and Dreaming. And I love doing anniversary interviews like that. It's not the first one I've ever done. I did a few. Actually, you know what's funny about that? One of the very first interviews I ever did was for an album anniversary. Actually, Stephen Jenkins of Third Eye Blind, and maybe I'll put it on here sometime, back in 2017, had to be like the fourth interview I ever did in my entire life. And I was over at a top 40 station I was working at the time. And one day I came in. It was the coolest thing. My manager came in and she's like, "Hey, you want to interview Stephen Jenkins, the singer of Third Eye Blind, tomorrow?" And I'm like, "Yes, like, of course." So it's like, why would I not? You know, I love Third Eye Blind. Like, of course I want to interview him. And yeah, that was for the promotion of they were going on tour doing the self-titled record front to back. The 20-year anniversary, and then they did a reissue of that record and everything. And actually, yeah, that was one of the first interviews I ever did. I think, like I said, like fourth or fifth, I believe. But yeah, so I've always loved doing those, and this one's fun. That one was more a straight up like radio promotion thing where like, you know, they call in, like he calls a bunch of radio stations like one day for like 2 hours and you get like 10 minutes with them. So, I mean, definitely not like an in-depth interview or anything like that, but it is funny. So one of the first interviews I ever did was kind of a retrospective, you know, of a record. But anyways, I love doing these, and on the podcast I really do because I get to go more in-depth than usual. And this week, if you are a fan of the Hidden in Plain View one, I think you're going to like this one. Because tonight, I am talking, tonight or today, it's weird on here. It's whenever you're listening to this. But whenever you are listening to this, I'm talking to Ben Jorgensen, the frontman of Armor for Sleep, whose fan favorite record, I would say most people's favorite album of theirs, What to Do When You Are Dead, that turns 15 this year, came out back in 2005 on Equal Vision Records. And it's crazy, you know, like with Hidden in Plain View, like I was telling Joe, I didn't discover them until like, you know, 2012, 2013, I probably heard Life and Dreaming for the first time, whereas Armor for Sleep, I can still remember back in 2005. This is funny. You know, I remember the Car Underwater video, obviously, a lot on Fuse, but before even that, the first thing I remember is the commercial. Hit me up if you remember this. I know sometimes there's things that I remember and then I can never find. I'm not going to get sidetracked, but I was just thinking about this the other day. I swear that Fall Out Boy once played on Mad TV. I swear they were a live guest, but when I look it up, I can find nothing. So I just think it was a figment of my imagination. I probably saw some other pop punk band play on Mad TV in like 2004 or 5 that was not Fall Out Boy, but somewhere in my mind, I just thought it was. Now, with this Armor for Sleep commercial, I wanted to go back and look for it because I'm like, I swear I remember Car Underwater, the chorus of it, that part of the music video, being in a commercial for Equal Vision Records. It was like that and another band, but I did find it, so I was not crazy. But let me know if you remember that commercial at all. I really like that. I remember that. And kind of along the same lines, and I've never found this one, but I swear I remember this as well. Hit me up, powerchordhour@gmail.com. If you were back in those Fuse days, some of my favorite days that I found so many bands that way around this era in 2005. But the other one I remember is Hawthorne Heights having Ohio's for Lovers in a cell phone ringtone commercial. And I swear I remember that. I've never been able to find it online, but I swear that was a thing on Fuse. It was a commercial for all the hot new ringtones you could buy for your Razor. I don't even know if the Razor was out yet, but yeah, one of them was Ohio's for Lovers, and it played like for a second, like the music video. But that's another commercial I remember on Fuse. But anyway, my earliest memory of Armor for Sleep would be that Car Underwater commercial. And then obviously I started seeing the whole video. And, so that's so big for me, to do this. It was so cool to talk to Ben, because I just look back at that and it's like my earliest memories. I was never really an MTV person. I guess I saw TRL here and there, but I was never one of those people who that was never a thing for me. MTV never had that mark on me that I feel like it did for a lot of people. For me, it was Fuse. And I think a lot of people my age probably had that though too. Around 2004, 2005, like so many of the bands that I got into were from Fuse. And I mean, Armor for Sleep being one of the first ones that I can remember. And, so just absolutely huge for me. And I still love this stuff. It's not like sometimes you hear people like, 12-year-old me would be so stoked if they knew I was like talking to so-and-so. And it's like, yeah, but I still love Armor for Sleep. Like this record, like What to Do When You Are Dead is like, I probably like it more than I did even back then. So it's like, it's not even like that. It's like this stuff is so timeless. It's like I'm still like present day me was so stoked to do this. I still love that record, and I love Armor for Sleep. I think they're very underrated. And so this was really fun. Got to go really in depth on What to Do When You Were Dead and a whole lot more. So we're gonna get into that right now. I'm gonna shut up here and let you hear the interview that you were here to hear. And I do hope you enjoy it. And don't forget to follow us at Power Chord Hour on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud. Obviously, got the radio show on 107.9 WRFA in Jamestown, New York, every Friday night at 10 Eastern. And yeah, like I said, hit me up, powerchordhour@gmail.com. If you remember that Armor for Sleep commercial or the Ohio is for Lovers ringtone commercial, I also want to let me know about that. And sometime I got to have JT from Hawthorne Heights on here, and I'm going to ask him about it because I don't think I ever have, but I know that was real. I think the Fall Out Boy on Mad TV was a figment of my imagination, but I swear the Hawthorne Heights ringtone commercial was real, and I have confirmed that the Armor for Sleep commercial was real, which I think is awesome. But anyways, here's my interview with Ben Jorgensen talking 15 years of What to Do When You Were Dead right here on the Power Chord Hour podcast. Right now on the Power Chord Hour, we're talking to Ben Jorgensen, the frontman of Armor for Sleep, and the band's sophomore record and fan favorite, What to Do When You Were Dead, turns 15 this year, and the band is celebrating with a reunion tour and a vinyl reissue. We're going to talk all about that, get into the making of the record, and all that good stuff. Ben, how are you tonight?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
So I've been excited for this. Before we get into the record, kind of going back a little further to the beginning of Armor for Sleep. I know before Armor, you did play drums in a band, Random Task. Was Armor for Sleep you played drums in that, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so for Armor for Sleep, I mean, was that the very first band that you were singing and playing guitar in?
100%, yeah. So what happened is Random Task was a band that my best friends and I started when we were in 6th grade. And then when we got to high school in 9th grade, we teamed up with this guy, Matt, who would become the singer of our band. And all throughout high school, we played shows all around New Jersey. And then by the time we were seniors in high school, I had picked up the guitar because my bandmates would leave their instruments in my mom's basement in between practices. And so I taught myself how to play guitar. And by the end of that band, when I was a senior in high school, I started getting really into songwriting. So for our last album that we put out as a band, Random Task, I actually wound up writing a lot of the songs lyrically and musically. And so, but I had never actually sang the songs myself. So when I started Armor for Sleep, which was directly after my senior year in high school, yeah, that was the first time I had ever sang on the songs that I had written.
So, like you said, you were kind of teaching yourself guitar. Like, how'd you start? Was it mostly like power chords and just kind of playing along to, like different bands and stuff?
Yeah, I would mess around at first. And then in high school, I got super into, since I couldn't like read music and I never had a proper guitar lesson, I actually found a bunch of guitar tab websites online. And I remember at the time I was super into OK Computer by Radiohead, and I really wanted to figure out how to play that. So I found a bunch of websites that had the tab, and basically guitar tab, for people who don't know, is like, you take this finger, you put it here, you take this finger, it's like, it's almost like a picture version of where to put your fingers on a guitar, so you don't have to know anything about it. And I kind of just fumbled my way through it that way, and learned what I needed to learn.
And was that weird at all when you did transition? Like were you hesitant at all when you were starting doing the songs for Armor for Sleep? Were you like even at that point, if you started writing the songs, now you said you hadn't like really sang yet, like was that were you nervous at all, like going like I'm going from drums to then going front and center with what I'm doing now?
Totally, yeah. I was definitely felt a little weird about it, but I guess I didn't anticipate the full trajectory that the band would take. Like the first Armor demo I made, I kind of like loosely started like distributing and getting it out there, but the response I got was pretty immediate. Like I don't think I was personally ready for it at that time. But that kind of dictated what happened. Like I don't think in my head I had planned for what was going to happen as a band after making the first demo, but it just so happened that like I guess the time and music was right for that kind of thing, and the people that I knew in that scene of music were looking for that thing, so it kind of worked out.
Was the demos, I mean, are they pretty true to what people know from the Armor for Sleep sound? I mean, were they anything that were they about the same?
They were 100% the same. Actually, not to skip ahead too much, but on the 15-year anniversary edition of What to Do When You Are Dead, it's like a double LP, and on the second LP, we actually are including a bunch of like early demos. So
nice.
So the first demo I did was 2 songs. It was Dream to Make Believe and Slip Like Space, which is the last song on our first record, which is called Dream to Make Believe. And it was just me playing all the instruments, and it sounds just like a slightly worse version of the songs that wound up on the album. But yeah, I mean, it just basically sounds like an early version of that.
How long after you started writing songs for Armor for Sleep did you start looking for other band members?
So I recorded the demo with those 2 songs in August of 2001, and I started looking for band members probably in like September or October of 2001. And I got Anthony in the band, who's been in the band ever since, and these other 2 guys named Paul and AJ were in the band for a little bit. We did some more demos with them, and then so all of us were in place by the time the summer rolled around, which was summer of 2002, and that's when we flew to LA to record our first album. And when we were in LA recording it, we realized like in the studio that it wasn't going to work out with Paul and AJ. So Anthony and I finished tracking that record, and we basically Gabe, who was the singer of the band Midtown at the time, was kind of like our manager and helping us out. And he was like, hey, when you guys come home from recording, we're leaving on tour, and we'd love for you guys to open up for us. And there's this other small band from Long Island called Taking Back Sunday who are opening up the tour too. And but we had just basically let Paul and AJ go, and we were going to come home from LA and have like 4 days before this tour with Midtown, which was insane because we had never done anything like that. So we called our friends Nash and PJ, who we knew from another band in New Jersey, and we were like, hey, we're coming back from LA, and then in 4 days we're supposed to go on tour with Midtown. Can you learn these songs? And so they were like, yeah. So we practiced for like 2 days, and then we did our first tour after having been a band for like a total of 4 days pretty much.
Wow, so that's crazy how much it sounds like Armor for Sleep then escalated from you, because it sounds like it started with a few demos to a lot of interest. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden it's like, all right, now we got to get an actual band together, and then all of a sudden you're touring with Midtown. That's pretty cool. That's really neat. So I mean, all this happens then within like a year of the band. Then would you say altogether then from like getting the demos and having them?
I mean, even kind of less than a year, but yeah, pretty much.
That's crazy. I mean, that's really neat. How long after touring then did you start thinking of doing Dream to Make Believe? Were you writing right after that tour? Or did you guys tour a little more before you started?
You mean What to Do When You Were Dead?
Oh no! Well, no, the first record.
Oh. So in that first year when we were doing the demos, we were just playing shows around New Jersey, and I mean, I guess when we had enough songs, like I said, Gabe was our manager, and he was like, you guys should think about doing a full length. And then I think he had the idea of us going to LA to record with this guy Ariel Reichschad that he knew, who used to be the singer of a ska band called the
I
Hippos.
love the Hippos.
Yeah, the Hippos were great, and so I was like, Gabe, I was like, I like the Hippos, but like, I don't know who this dude Ariel is. And he was like, no, he's a really talented guy. He wants to start producing records. Anyway, so he wound up producing Dream to Make Believe, and he has since gone on to be one of the biggest producers like in the music industry. He's produced Usher and Madonna and all the Vampire Weekend stuff. He's like a massive producer.
It's crazy to think that the front man of the Hippos doing that now. That's amazing,
yes. Yeah, he's a really cool guy.
But so that's kind of interesting. And then Dream to Make Believe too. I mean, What to Do When You Were Dead. Obviously, you have the concept to it, but there was a theme and concept to Dream to Make Believe as well, correct?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was a little bit more of a loose fitting concept. I think that's just more of like how I naturally write. Like it wasn't I just think there are themes that work throughout it, but maybe like kind of more of an unintentional themed record than What to Do When You Were Dead, which was definitely like a very planned out and themed record from the beginning.
So, like for that, the thing that always interests me, like I was thinking about this too before the interview, I feel like when you start thinking about it, like, I mean, you were very young, and I don't feel like a lot of young bands kind of have that. Like, I don't think they're ready to make a concept record, and including in the scene. I don't think like a lot of bands, like the bands that you toured with and stuff, did it that young. What kind of influenced you or made you like want to do that? What was it that made you want to write a concept record? I think it was very ambitious for a young band. It ended up working out great, but
thanks.
What made you want to do it though?
I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of friends that, also had eclectic tastes growing up. I was super into the scene and super into, bands that were coming up around us like Thursday and Saves the Day. And, my background, I started going to shows when I was in 7th or 8th grade, and it was all like hardcore shows. So I was super into the scene, but at the same time, I really loved Radiohead. Like OK Computer was one of my favorite albums ever. I really loved Pink Floyd, like Dark Side of the Moon. And, I just think, I thought those albums were really special. And, I don't know, maybe my friends who were in bands exclusively from the scene kind of like didn't, accept those kind of influences into their, musical catalog. But I certainly was a fan of those kind of records. I just thought it was really cool when, something was more than just a collection of songs. I just always connected to everything that I heard that had some kind of deeper connection.
I like that. And I mean, it sounds like too, I feel like the other part of that, like you were saying, like, like other people in bands, like maybe not accepting those influences. The thing is I feel like a lot of people at that age are kind of stubborn and won't accept it. Like Pink Floyd and all those other bands are actually good, or it's like, you didn't disown that. You're kind of like, we can be this kind of band, but it's like, hey, we also like, we like other things, we don't just like one genre. So I think that's interesting. Exactly. And, like when it comes to having a concept for a record, when you started writing, do you feel like that makes it easier when you kind of have a theme to stick to? Or like when you were doing What to Do When You Were Dead, did you ever feel confined? Like, was there ever a point where you're like, oh man, I'm almost kind of written myself into a corner here?
Sure. Yeah. No. It depends how you want to look at it. Like you can definitely wake up one day and look at it that way. For like, I bring this up as an example when I'm talking to people about writing songs. Like, you can, of course, make whatever piece of music you want to make, but technically a song, what makes a song work as a song is that it has some kind of chorus that repeats. And usually it has some kind of bridge after the first couple repetitions of the chorus to give people like a refresher so they don't hear the chorus 5 million times. But in general, a song needs a chorus that repeats some kind, you know what I mean? And when writing a song, you could view that as limiting, but it can also be freeing, because you're giving yourself these parameters, and in some ways it unlocks your creativity, because instead of just thinking of every random thing, you have these parameters that you have to think inside of. And just also like a haiku, it's a super limited syllable pattern of a poem, but in some ways that forces, or that yields the most creative results, and almost the best haikus are even more creative than just a poem with 8 million words, because you have to be creative about how you're going to fit within those parameters. So I thought writing a concept album about that specific idea was a good experiment, and it definitely, for me, freed me up creatively to think of cool ways to get the message across, or express myself and express ourselves through that medium.
I like the way that you use parameters too, because that does, for like writing songs, you're right, because if you don't have some kind of parameter or kind of something to go off of, then there's no real quality control. You're just kind of you can just kind of write anything. So I kind of like that, because
Exactly.
parameters you do need those to some extent. And,
Yes.
Talking about the concepts and the themes of what to do when you were dead, I feel like most people or fans probably know, kind of written from the perspective of someone dead. But do you kind of want to explain a little more, like in your own words, kind of, you wrote it, like, what is the concept and story behind the record?
I think you just said it. Yeah. So
Basically that?
Basically that. Yeah. I mean, the record opens up with what seems like some kind of suicide, or someone had something, seems like they just went through a death, and the rest of the album is them trying to reconnect with people, or I guess in this case specifically one person from their lives, and deals a lot with I guess regret, and deals with kind of looking back at a time when things were different, and deals with the finality of decisions that we make in our lives. And I think ultimately, obviously, it's more about life and the relationships that we have when we're alive. I don't think anybody thinks this is, a realistic view of what happens after you die. I like metaphors, and I like analogies. And so this album, I guess I've always viewed it as, a metaphor for things that people experience in their lives that have nothing to do with death, that just have to do with relationships.
I think something that you guys did really well on this record, the fact that you can listen to it, and the fact that you kind of have a story and a concept there, but also you can go through and just listen to the songs by themselves, and I think they still work. And there's like, you don't need to hear, like, say, the track prior for it to make sense or anything like that.
Right.
Was that intentional at all, or is that just how it came out? Like, did you ever think about that when doing it? Like, okay, I still want to write this so the songs can stand by themselves.
100%. Yeah, that was definitely a goal, to have songs that could stand by themselves, yet also completed a larger story. And it was being creative in what's too much of, like, a song that would stand too much on its own. Like, we didn't want to make a song that wouldn't fit in with the story, but also the converse was true. We didn't want a song that exclusively fit into the story, but that wouldn't be enjoyable to listen to on its own. I think ultimately, as the writer, that kind of fell on my shoulders to kind of figure out a nice balance of those two things.
And with the lyrics, I mean, obviously it's kind of from, a character's point of view, but when you were writing them, I mean, would you say you removed yourself completely, or were you still kind of, interjecting? Maybe they're not maybe autobiographical songs, but, there's still obviously maybe things in your life, or, I mean, were you completely writing it like removed? Like, this is not, none of this is of your life. This is all from, like, the perspective of another character.
No, I mean, like, that whole record is very personal to me, based on things that were going on in my life, specifically a relationship that I was going through, and also how weird my life was, being 20 years old, having pretty much said, that I was going to go try this music thing and the repercussions that had in my life. So it was all completely personal, almost like behind the mask of this other story. But I don't think I would have been able to do it and just like remove myself from the equation. Yeah.
And then for the record, when you guys did finally go in to record it, did you have most of it written or did you write anything in the studio?
So what was interesting about this record is that all of the songs that wound up on the record, aside from one, which is a B-side, which we released with the record, but that didn't actually like fit in the sequence of the record. Those are the only songs that we wrote for this album. So we planned it out beforehand, to a T. So we weren't writing like a bunch of songs and then choosing from them. We wrote all of the songs. And then when we went with Machine, our producer, and talked about the idea and he got on board, we actually did pre-production with him, where we recorded all of the songs in order so that we could take a bird's eye view of the sequence of everything and the story and make sure that we were happy with it. So I think a couple months before we actually went into the studio for real with him, we had done like a mock-up of the whole album from our rehearsal space, from beginning to end.
How did you like recording like that? Because that is kind of unconventional, like to kind of record the songs in the sequence of the record. Like, did you like recording it that way?
Yeah, I loved it. In fact, that's my preferred way to do it. And I would recommend that to all other bands. I mean, I everyone works in different ways, but kind of the formula of just like writing a million songs and then choosing which will fit on the album, I don't know. For me personally, I feel like that's a recipe for a disjointed batch of songs where, I guess, the way we did things, there's a certain focus to the sound of all the songs because they were written with like one mission in mind. And I feel like when I've heard bands do similar things where they write specifically for one album instead of a mishmash, it definitely sounds more cohesive to my ears, at least.
No, I would agree. There's a lot of times when, a band will come out of a studio and say we have like a double or triple album, and sometimes that's not good. That doesn't, there's not always quality to that. So yeah, it's interesting you recorded that way, but yeah, that like the way you explain it, that sounds like that would be a good way to record. And you did mention your producer Machine on there. I gotta say, I mean, I love this record, but I've been listening to it a lot lately, and what I love about it, the production on it is timeless in the way that it doesn't sound like a certain era. You don't listen to it and go, oh, I can pinpoint the year that came out. It's very timeless. I feel like the way it's produced. I mean, in a lot of ways, a very big rock record. I think the guitars sound huge. I think there's a full sound. When you went in, I mean, is that another thing? You're kind of talking about how you had a lot of this planned out. When you went into the studio, did you always kind of have that vision of like, all right, this is going to be, we want this to sound really big, we want it to sound massive, or is that something that you kind of figured out once you started working with Machine and you kind of showed them what you had, and that's kind of, what you guys came to, the conclusion of like, this is what it's going to sound best on the record?
Yeah, so Machine was an interesting choice because I don't think he was a little bit outside our realm of knowledge of producers. Like, we were so embedded in the scene that the guys we knew that I think we initially wanted to go with were the guys that basically recorded every other, band that sounded like us. And Machine was a little bit on the outside. Like the record he had done most recently before us was a Lamb of God record, which is, obviously a different flavor than us.
Oh yeah.
And he had all these different kind of influences that at first we were like, is this the right guy? Because, he wasn't as embedded in the scene and he didn't have he didn't fall back on the same sounds that I think wound up now kind of like dating that scene a little bit. But in the end, the fact that he came from such a different space, I think helped the record stand out a little bit sonically. But I think Machine's biggest contribution was the vision that he had in doing the record as a like as a cohesive thing. I feel like other producers would have been like, oh, cool, yeah, that's a cool idea. Let's just track everything. But Machine was super into the idea of combining elements, of like, Dark Side of the Moon, like we talked about, and all these like slightly like trippier kind of things. And he really wanted to take the ball and like run with that. And I think that was, ultimately one of the things that made this record special.
I love the guitars on it. I think they sound huge. What was some of the gear that you use? Like, what were some of the guitars and amps you played on that record?
I know amp-wise, we used a Bogner for a bunch of the main rhythm guitars. We were also using, I think it was a Bogner combined with a dual rectifier and probably my JCM 900 head for all like the gear nerds out there.
I play a 900. I love 900s.
Oh, sweet, yeah, they're so good. I don't know where my 900 is now. I think it's been lost.
Gotta get yourself a new one.
I know. And guitar wise, what were we doing? I think we were pretty much either on our we had a bunch of Telecaster Deluxes, so it's like Telecasters, but they have the humbucker pickups, so you kind of get a little bit of that Fender twang, but also like the beefiness that's in a lot of like Gibsons. And then I believe we had a Gibson or two floating around there as well.
Nice. No, very, very nice gear in there. That's some really good stuff. How about like, for the songs on the record, which one would you say changed the most from the demos? Like on that record, like what changed drastically the most from when you first wrote it?
Good question. I would say probably Basement Ghost Singing, I think, was a song that we had that was based off of a riff that I'd been messing around with using a Line 6 delay pedal that's kind of like that stereo delay sound in it. And we had the song, but Machine had this idea of taking that and having that song be like one of the more like production oriented tracks on the record. So he kind of was a big proponent of doing these like looped kind of like acidy drum parts playing in the verses, almost like an electro feel. And I just think that was something that was unexpected, that was not unwelcome at all. But I don't think we saw that song going in that like kind of like trippy of a direction. But I gotta say, it turned out to be like one of my favorite songs on the record. And all that production stuff is 100% Machine.
And the band definitely got some radio airplay. Your videos got played on Fuse and MTV. I mean, I still remember seeing Car Underwater for the first time on Fuse. Yeah. Do you remember the first time that you either heard the band on the radio or saw one of your videos on TV?
I don't remember the exact time, but I remember seeing a bunch of stuff on MTV. I guess it was MTV2 at the time. And it was just nuts. It was like just a whole different level for us. And it was really interesting.
Was all of this pretty like new for you? Like as far as Random Task goes, I mean, it sounds like you were more like a local band. Like, I mean, so is all of this pretty new, like touring around the country outside of Jersey? And, I mean, obviously getting some radio play and like video, probably even doing music videos and stuff. Was this the first time then?
Totally, yeah. The one caveat I will say is that a lot changed in a few years. And when we were in Random Task, we were all being heavily influenced by these bands like I mentioned before, like Saves the Day and Thursday were two bands from New Jersey that Random Task in high school looked up to and we loved. And there were all these quote unquote emo bands coming out that would come and tour through New Jersey that we all loved. And looking back on it now, a lot of other people my age around the country were also being influenced by them. So by the time that Armor for Sleep came around and we did one record, and then once we did What to Do When You Were Dead, MTV was a possibility in the scene because the scene had been blowing up so much. So it's not like Random Task ever could have gotten there at the time because the scene wasn't bubbling over to the same extent that it was once Armor for Sleep, had gotten started. And so there really was this kind of like clamoring from major labels to kind of like cash in on the scene. And eventually they did with bands like, My Chem and Fall Out Boy, who, came from the same exact place that Armor for Sleep did, but they managed to obviously break over into the mainstream.
And on the subject of music videos, you guys did 3 of them for What to Do When You Were Dead. Is there one that you enjoyed making the most?
No. I hated doing videos.
Okay,
yeah.
this is why I ask this, because you either get, when I ask people this, either their fond memories or music videos are the worst damn thing to make. I always hear one or the other.
Oh, they suck so much. Because here's the thing, like, they suck for me. Like, playing live shows, I had to really understand what that was, because I always used to feel like such a phony on stage performing. I just felt like it was so like arrogant to be up there and be like rocking out, because like if I didn't feel like that at the time, I just felt like it was like arrogant. And obviously that's a really weird perspective to have. But music videos, like knowing how long they take and how many times you have to do a performance, as someone who felt like that, like really lame, like looking like they're emotionally expressing themselves at a certain time of night when they're not necessarily feeling anything emotionally, to be on a music video shoot and have somebody say, okay, you're going to have to pretend to be emotional for the next 5 hours over and over again. It just feels really lame. And like, I just always had trouble like playing along. Maybe it's insecurity, but it just never came naturally to me. And also, for those of you who haven't been on a set before of something that's filming, everything moves so slowly. And you have to do everything a million times, and then you have to wait 2 hours for people to move a light up or down. Then you have to go out and do something for 2 hours and then wait around. It's like so not glamorous, and it takes so long. And, the only performance we knew was getting on stage, playing for 20 minutes, and then getting off stage. And that was enough for us. So having to sit through these video shoots was just like unexpectedly torturous.
Yeah, they don't sound fun to me, to be honest. Yeah, the long hours and like having to continually play multiple times, or pretend play basically to a song multiple times like that. Yeah, does not sound fun. So yeah, I did wonder. That's why I asked, because normally you get it's normally, we had a nice time doing it, or it's hell, they're 12-hour days. And so that is interesting. But going on to like the touring for that record, what were some bands that you toured with once the record came out?
We did Warped Tour that summer. Funny story, we shared a bus with a band called From First to Last.
Oh yeah.
Who were already pretty big at the time, and they had this singer who was a 16-year-old kid. His name was Sonny, and people from across the country would just flip out to see this band play because this kid was such a good singer. And we shared a bus with them, and the other guys in the band were like totally cool, but just Sonny was like the nicest guy on the face of the planet. Like, he gave me a t-shirt for my birthday, even though I'd only known him for like a week. Anyway, he's grown up to be Skrillex, and he's like a super talented, amazing guy. And whenever that name comes up, I always vouch for him, and say like, oh, Skrillex, yeah, that dude is for real, and like one of the nicest guys I've ever met. So we toured with them. We toured with Taking Back Sunday a bunch when they were coming up. We obviously toured with Midtown, and in the beginning, we would take any tour we could. And I don't know if our first booking agent and manager were trying to mess with us, but they were like, we want you guys to become hardened on the road. So they purposely put us on tour with all these hardcore bands. Like, there was this band I loved who are on Eagle Vision called Bane. Like, I would go to all their shows as a kid all the time, but I was like, like, I just don't know if their fans are going to like us at all. But whatever, we got thrown on tour with them, and I guess we learned how to survive on stage when there's a room full of people with their arms crossed. We learned that, like, you got to make it work, and you got to figure out how to just gain fans however you can. So looking back on it, I'm happy we did those tours. But yeah, we toured with some weird hard metal bands back in the day.
And do you think then yeah, at the end though, that helped you? Because I mean, and I'm thinking of that, like, yeah, Bane and Armor for Sleep is an interesting lineup. So I mean, at the end, I guess that would probably help, right? I mean, then playing later, like if you had to open for other bands who may not particularly, their fans may not particularly know you or be fans of your music, I guess that kind of helps things. But
yeah, I mean, I think it took us a while, and I just think we needed to be out there. And I'm honestly surprised the people that like had faith in us, like our manager Gabe at the time, and the management company that we went with. I'm surprised they honestly had faith in us at the beginning, because we were like super green. I think eventually we figured it out, but I just can't imagine nowadays, people wanting to work with a band that is just like, as new to everything as we were.
So the band is gearing up for an upcoming tour, first one since 2015 for the 15th anniversary of the record. Have any of the dates been affected, or I mean, is everything still pretty much in place and good to go?
So what's the date? The date is March 22nd, 2020 right now. So the first show on this tour is supposed to be in mid-June, and then it's kind of an interesting tour because it's not like one string of dates. It actually spans through the summer and then through to September. And for those listening in the future, we're currently on like week 2 of this basically national emergency of the coronavirus pandemic. And it's affecting everything. And at first, 2 weeks ago, we were like, the first show's not till June, it should be fine. But like the more and more bad news that we get, the more and more I think the concert world is thinking that things which were safely going to happen in the summer might have to move. So, I would think that in the next week or so, we're going to have to make a decision about if we want to just like take our chances and wait, or if we want to be proactive and like safe for everyone's sake and just take things and push them back a little bit, because it would just suck to wait and then not be able to reschedule shows. And also it would suck if like we technically could play the shows, but if people are still so shell shocked from this whole thing that no one comes out. So we're going to figure out what to do. It's tough to say because nobody can predict like what a safe time is for people to go to shows again.
Yeah.
But all we can do is take the best opinions of our booking agent and talk to these venues and kind of get the vibe on what things are going to be like over the summer.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I know everything is definitely screwy, and yeah, the whole I'm sure summer shows, they'll be interesting to see how everything goes. But yeah, hopefully everything gets worked out either way. So this is
yeah, it definitely will. Yeah.
So if I'm not wrong, right, this is the first time you guys will be playing together since 2015.
Yeah, definitely.
And then have you started rehearsing together yet, or no?
We were going to in April, but yeah, it looks like that might not happen. But you know what? There are remote rehearsals that we can do that we'll definitely try to do. But again, if things get pushed back a little bit, we'll definitely be able to get together before then. Not only that, we did this for so long that so much of this is like, second nature to us.
It's funny. That's exactly what I was about to ask you, because I was going to say, you guys obviously, since breaking up in 2009, you still play shows here and there. And I was going to ask that, like, is it mostly muscle memory now, or do you ever have to go back and like relearn altogether?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely will, and we'll definitely be, since I'm in LA and the other guys are still on the East Coast, we'll definitely get together, but we're going to have to do some rehearsals, on our own before we get together just to be efficient. But I find when I start playing these songs, even if I haven't listened to them for years, there's a part of my brain that, these songs like embedded themselves, and I just don't forget any part of them, I mean, it's funny, like, I was listening to a podcast about the most common dream that people have, which I believe the most common dream that people have is being back in school of some kind, whether it's high school or like trying to get to like class or something. For me, it's always getting to stage and like, being late to a show or like forgetting a set list, like I think we all did that at such a transformative time in our lives that those things are just like etched into our brains. That being said, we still definitely need to practice, and we would suck if we didn't, get together and rehearse. And also I want to do, I think we all want to do something special for these shows. So it's not just like, here's the album, goodbye, like we want to, have really good performances for everyone. So we will be rehearsing in depth.
As far as songs go for the upcoming tour, any ones that you're like looking most forward to playing live?
Yeah, I mean, so we're definitely going to play the album, obviously, because this is an album tour. And then we're definitely going to play additional stuff. And we were talking about going back and playing some songs from Dreams of Make Believe that actually I don't think we've ever played as a band, They're just some songs that we didn't have the luxury of playing because we didn't do that many headlining tours. So just kind of going back and also playing some songs over the years that have been on some, I don't know, that were just kind of like leaked online that some of our fans know, but not everyone would know, that we just think would be fun to play. I think we definitely want to have like a pretty large amount of songs ready to go so that we can play alternate set lists for people who are going to come to multiple shows.
Oh, nice. Do you plan on playing the record in sequence, or is it kind of like, I know some bands like you'll play the record, but it, sprinkled in with those other songs?
That's a good question. That's kind of an ongoing discussion. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like when bands do these type of things, the most gratifying way is to hear the album in order. I think it's just a little confusing when you bounce around. But my gut, my gut instinct is to kind of do like a customized order of a set, one that includes all of the songs from the album, but not necessarily in the order that everybody knows. But I think we'll wind up mostly doing it in order for this tour, just because I think last time when we did it, we did more of like a sprinkling of these songs in kind of different orders every night. I think we might stick more to doing this album like in order.
Nice. I mean, as a fan, I always like that more, I think. I mean, I'm always stoked anyways because like you get to hear the album. But yeah, I like it in sequence like that. I normally like when bands do that. But for you personally, kind of now, I know musically you're not really doing like any bands, correct? You're not like in a band right now.
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you play or write it for fun at all still, or do you just kind of only like when Armor gets back together?
Yeah, I do little things here and there. I think I needed a break for a while, and it's hard to put out music if you don't want to kind of like have the spotlight on you, and especially now with social media, like if you want to put out music you want more than like two people to hear it, you kind of have to be like the social media person that's like, here's my thing, look at me. And like I did that for so long, and I just kind of wanted a break from being that guy for a while. So I wasn't like formally releasing music for a long time. However, yeah, I mean, I think all this almost stuff has been really fun, and it's been really cool to see the reaction that like so many of our fans, have been so into this tour, and um, it's been cool. So it definitely gets me thinking about, you know, some stuff. I think, I used to always think like, oh, we could only be a band if we dropped everything we were doing in our lives and wanted to like go on tour 9 months out of the year. And I just think that since things have changed with the internet and the way that music is distributed, like it doesn't necessarily have to be like that, and I don't think people expect that anymore. So yeah, I don't know. I've just been like kind of mulling things over in my head, and yeah, it's been cool.
I think you're right about that though too, that model changing, because it's funny, I was actually thinking about this just the other day, because I notice a lot of bands now that are getting signed who are like new bands who kind of, including they may be like a little like not old, but it's like maybe they're like more in their late 20s, like early 30s or something, and they have like jobs and stuff, and these bands are still getting signed to labels, they tour when they can, but yeah, it's not like a hey, we need to gruel for 9 months on the road, we have to do this huge like press tour or anything like that. I think you can now just kind of casually do things as you want, and I think people don't expect too much from you to go do that. But
and when we came out with What to Do in Her Den, all the album was still such a thing. And I think at the time when iTunes started selling singles, we were like, the album's dead. Like, we didn't like how, people devalued the album then, because obviously like the album meant so much to us. I think, maybe my position on that has changed a little bit, and that can be advantageous to a band that wants to do things in a more unconventional way. Like, I look at the way Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails releases music. I think he kind of got to the point too where he didn't want to lock himself away for 3 years to come out with an album of 12 songs and have people be over it in a week because of everyone's short attention spans. So he comes out with like, a handful of songs, a couple times a year, and his fans are totally stoked about it. He still puts out awesome music, but it doesn't have to be this like huge buildup for the one album, and then you're going to tour 2 years on that one album. The formula is just changing for everyone.
Oh, absolutely. No, that makes sense. I was just talking to Joe, the singer of Hidden in Plain View, and they just recorded some songs actually, and they don't have a label and they don't know what they're doing with it. But he said the same thing. They're like, maybe we'll release them as singles, maybe release it as an EP. Like, we don't know. Like, totally. There's no model anymore. When you guys started, that's the thing. Like in 2005, you signed to a label. You get your stuff played on TV and radio. You go do all that stuff, and yeah, now it's not as cut and dry, I would say.
Exactly. And especially like for a band that already has a fan base in place like us, where we don't need to scramble as much to get everyone's attention, because we're under no illusions that like if we did do new music that we'd want to like rise to the top of the rock charts. Like, it would basically be for the people that were already familiar with our band. So I think that's kind of relieves some pressure from the whole thing.
Oh, totally. And, kind of moving on now, I have a few listener questions,
sure,
if you wouldn't mind. We have from BTD Feeling This on Twitter, and kind of what we're talking about. Any plans on writing new music with Armor, or is it just the tour right now?
So I think a year or two ago, my answer would have been different. I think there are no specific plans right now. But as I was just kind of alluding to, I think maybe now I'm possibly seeing some possible avenues where it could work, and I think it's too early to say anything else, but I don't think it's like the same, I guess, hard no that it would have been before.
Never say never, basically.
Never say never. There you go.
So I have another one here from @OutOfServiceFans on Twitter, and they said, of the following singers, they gave you a couple, Which would you most want to collaborate with? Shane Told of Silverstein, Mark Hoppus of Blink-182, J.T. Woodruff of Hawthorne Heights, Dan Marcella of Story of the Year, Tyson Ritter of All American Rejects, or Andrew McMahon of Something Corporate? Of those 6, who would you like to collaborate with the most?
Oh man, there's some great people in there. I mean, Shane is awesome. I would be stoked to do a song with Shane. I mean, he's been my friend for a long time. JT is also a great dude as well. That also kind of makes me smile to think about doing something with him. Andrew. So one of the songs for our last album on Smile for Them, I actually went over to his house and he helped me work through the song. And actually, it was one of those songs where he heard it and he was like, honestly, he's like, I wouldn't do that much with it, because he liked it. And I always thought that was kind of like a big move for him to make, because I feel like everybody as a songwriter jumps to like, oh, let me put my fingerprints on this. But Andrew was like, honestly, for this song, like I wouldn't do much. And I've always loved Andrew as a songwriter. So also working with him would be great as well. So if I had to pick one, I would pick all 3 of them.
Now we have one more question, and one is actually from those people. When I mentioned that I was interviewing you, JT from Hawthorne Heights told me to ask you if he made fun of you for bringing a baseball mitt on the 2007 Project Revolution tour.
He wants to know if he made fun of me?
He asked me to mention that to you, yes. He said that he made fun of you for bringing a baseball mitt on that tour. And
know what's funny is that I don't remember him making fun of me, but I would think that he would be one of the last people to make fun of me for that, because we didn't know this about Hawthorne Heights. I don't know what it is. I think being in a band, you grow up as like a musician in bands, probably in high school, thinking that like jocks suck and like we can't like sports because sports aren't cool, like music's our thing. And so I think in a lot of bands, that's always in the back of their heads. And Hawthorne Heights were one of the first bands that we met on tour who also really liked baseball a lot. And like, I don't think we were our bass player was a big Yankees fan and got me to be a Yankees fan on tour. And like, I just remember thinking like, that's the least cool thing as a band we can do is be a fan of baseball. But I remember we met Hawthorne Heights and they were like, oh yeah, we love baseball. And I think we bonded over the fact that we liked sports together. So I don't remember JT making fun of me specifically for the baseball glove, but I do think that's funny because that's something that I remember about Hawthorne Heights is like our love of baseball. That
is funny then. Yeah, I don't know why he said, and then he followed that up with baseball isn't punk.
Did he really?
Yes, that I think he was mostly
so funny.
He was joking, but yeah, he was the very first person I put up on Facebook. I'm like, hey, I'm really stoked interviewing Ben. It's like, anyone got questions? Yep, that was the first always I ask him about that.
Yeah, but no, that's really funny. I think he's saying that as a joke because he knows that they were into baseball too, and we must have talked about it a bunch. That's really funny. Yeah, JT's a good dude.
So now, we're kind of closing up here. Had a lot of fun talking about this. So where can people find you online? Where can they find Armor for Sleep online? All that good stuff. Like we said, we have you have the vinyl reissue. Is that out now or is that coming out soon?
So Equal Vision released 500 copies for sale, but those sold out like real fast. So we're trying to figure out how to get more printed. However, I think all of the vinyl printing plants may be like closing temporarily because of this insanity too. So I don't know. But yeah, it'll be on Equal Vision's website, which is equalvision.com, I believe. And then for all things Armor for Sleep, you can either go to armorforsleep.com or it's at Armor for Sleep on Instagram or on Facebook. And I'm on Instagram as @BenJorg, so that's BenJorg. And Instagram is the only real social media that I use. I haven't tweeted in like 4 years.
No, that's what you were saying earlier. Yeah, you're not a big, maybe not a big social media guy, but you're not really into being on there and just kind of plastering everything you're doing every second, basically.
Kind of, yeah.
But
yeah, I don't like people being able to have tabs on me all the time and like know where I am and what I'm doing.
hey, I can't blame you for that. I definitely
Yeah.
can't blame you. So, Ben, that was a lot of fun. And right now we're going to play a couple songs off of what to do when you were dead. Tongue tied right there. We're going to start it right now with The Truth About Heaven right here on the Power Chord Hour. Right here on the Power Chord Hour podcast. That was Armor for Sleep with Car Underwater. And before that was Armor for Sleep with The Truth About Heaven. I want to thank Ben Jorgensen once again for calling in. That was so much fun to hear. And, right now things are up in the air like we were talking about with the 15-year anniversary. Hopefully nothing's changed, which who knows? If you're listening to this day it comes out, nothing's changed. Who the hell knows? Everything going on. You could be listening to this, 4 days later, 5 days later, and maybe, at that point, everything's been rescheduled. Everything's so weird right now. I was thinking that it would be funny because, not even funny, but almost like a documentation of kind of this moment in time because, right now everything makes sense, but it's like, it'll be funny if you're listening to this, in like 5 or 6 years and someone's listening and it's like, all of a sudden there's a part where we're talking about that. It's like, well, the show's supposed to happen, but the coronavirus is like, it's like we may be stuck indoors. We don't know. It's like, it's kind of interesting. It's like a little, it definitely kind of documents the time that we've done this interview in. But, either way, they'll be touring this year, no matter what, whether it's summer or fall. It's going to be a really good tour. So far, before anything's been rescheduled, like half of the dates are sold out. I forgot to mention that in the interview, but like half of the dates are sold out. The ones closest to me were already completely sold. So this is a tour that's doing very well. And if you're an Armor fan, they don't play a ton. So if you get the chance, like now, definitely go see them later on this reunion tour. And either way, no matter what, if you're holed up inside, go check out that What to Do When You Were Dead 15-year anniversary repress. A bunch of demos and B-sides, unreleased stuff on there. It is really, really cool. Who knows? That's another one with the variants. Like you said, a lot of those sold out already, and who knows with vinyl. It's all weird right now, but still, go check that out on the Equal Vision Records website, kind of get more of an idea for it. But go do that. Go follow them, all that good stuff. And, just go spin What to Do When You Were Dead to celebrate the 15 years. It's such a good record. It really is. Like I told him, it's like, it doesn't sound like 2005. It sounds like a timeless rock record. I think it ended up paying off that they didn't just work with a producer that, everyone else in the scene was working with at the time. I think that, I really do think that benefited them in the long run. So thank you so much for checking out this week's episode of the podcast. Tune in next week. We'll be doing the March rundown. Crazy to think we're already at the end of another month going into April. It's insane that we've been doing this podcast now for 4 months. Absolutely insane to me. I'm loving it, though. Thank you so much for checking it out. And stay connected with the show. We're at Power Chord Hour on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Please go follow us. We'd love if you did. And we're also on YouTube. Maybe you're listening to this on YouTube. You can go check that out there and all our past podcasts and all our old interviews, too. Only 4 months into this, but we're 4 years into the radio show. So there's interviews all over that thing going back to my very first one in 2016. You can hear it all there. We're also on Spotify. I put up a playlist of everything that I play on the radio show each week. And you can also check that out. It airs every Friday night at 10 Eastern on 107.9 WRFA in Jamestown, New York. But if you don't live there, don't fret. You can listen to it from anywhere in the world on WRFA's website. Just go to WRFALP.com and you can stream the station there. And also WRFA has a mobile app for iPhone only, no Android yet. So just go to the App Store if you got an iPhone, search WRFA and you'll find the mobile app there. And on there you can stream the station as well. And, if you got any song requests, you want to hit me up. I have free Power Chord Hour pins. I'd love to send you some. Hit me up, powerchordhour@gmail.com. Also hit me up if you remember the Car Underwater commercial, or if you remember the Ohio's for Lovers ringtone commercial. And if for some reason I'm not crazy and Fall Out Boy did play Mad TV and you also remember that, please let me know as well. All at powerchordhour@gmail.com. We will be back next week doing a whole rundown on the month of March, playing you some of the music that came out, letting you know about the releases.